experts and specialists in the topic of digitalization, servitization, to reduce losses post-harvest of small growers. Considering experiences from other regions outside Latin America and the Caribbean, but we are sure that are going to be of great use. It is a joint event among several organizations from the Global Innovation Center of the Convention, Base, ICA, and other groups that have that treat this topic of great importance. Without further ado, I thank you for your participation, and now I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Carlos Luis Garbio, who's the project manager of the Innovation Hub of the Convention, to give us some context. Welcome, Carlos. Go ahead. Thank you, dear Katia. It is a pleasure to be in this webinar today with you all. Good morning, dear panelists. Special greetings to Daniel for this opportunity, as well as to the team that is with him, as well as ICA and participants in this webinar. It is a pleasure for me from Climate Change Secretariat to link from to join you from Bonn to talk a little bit about the plans towards the COP. I have 15 minutes and I will take advantage to develop in detail one of the initiatives we are promoting, which is the Global Innovation Hub, Climate Change Global Innovation Hub, that will take place in the COP27. So with your okay, I'm gonna start sharing my screen in order to give you more details. Let me share my screen and let me know if you can see it. And if so, I would like to continue to put on the screen all this. We're going to talk about digitalization and servitization to reduce losses post-harvest and to raise the income of small farmers. Those are very important actions to progress within the agenda of efficiency, technological efficiency, and to reduce the emissions of carbon, to align these actions to Paris Agreement. And within all that, the COP27, where we can see that the agricultural sector is core issue on the climate agenda. And in this COP27 that will take place from November 7 to 18 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, we will see that the agenda of the agricultural sector is a visual agenda. We have made an important progress of the joint work on current EVA, where we expect to have a decision. But as you will see in the parallel work, there are a lot of progress made regarding sustainable food production. And under this framework, this topic for today is vital. Maybe with a holistic view of the COP work and the presidents from Egypt and the secretary, with the chair and the secretary, I'm going to make a pause because it seems there is a mic open. So if you can help me for somebody to close the microphone. Yes, we're checking, Carlos. Thank you. Shall I go on or do I have to wait till you solve the issue? You can continue, we will check. Thank you, Katia. So it's a point where I would like to give messages about the COP27. The commitment made by the chair from Egypt is very important. And this is to ensure an inclusive and transparent process, even pre-COP and during the COP. And there, our General Secretary, Simon Steele, has highlighted that the COP is very important because we need to show that this is a new implementation time. Under the framework of Paris Agreement, we are passing the book of rules and the results of the COP26, the Glasgow Agreement, to the task of implementation aimed to climate action and to raise the ambition science sets to achieve the 1.5. All this is regarding adaptation and mitigation. The signal that we should give in the negotiation process to align national agendas and goals and commitments of the national agreements under the Paris Agreement is very important. All this by establishing rules, regulations, policies, and programs that promote the human activity towards sustainable production patterns as well as consumption patterns. In that regard, this webinar is very important. Along with the action plan, with the national action plans, we have the sites, the vital sites of work, what we know as NDCs. We also have the implementation task aligned to mitigation activities as well as to adaptation and the discussions on funding in order to facilitate and implement this established plan and the losses and damages, which are other important chapters in the agenda. But the negotiation process is accompanied, supported by a cross-cutting access, support from civil society, from financial entities, many organizations that provide technical support with a series of announcements to implement plans. And within those, I would like to highlight some that were launched last year, and that for sure we will see similar announcements this year. Last year, the group of climate champions was very important with this campaign of Race to Zero, Race to Resilience, as well as the Alliance for Glasgow funding towards uh, zero net future and many other things that are related to the support of the agricultural sector. To conclude this snapshot about the priorities of the COP, there are three main axes that have been determined as important for today's discussion. First one is the radical cooperation. That is why it is so important that our organizations are aligned, using the synergy and improving our services of support to the countries. And to do so, innovation is vital beyond the technology innovation. And finally, the alignment of regulation policies, not only national, but regional and some that are related to the global alignment. The second part of my presentation is framed in the Global Center of Innovation of the Climate Change Secretary that we are launching since COP26, and now we're going to have skills more related to the action of climate innovation. This is a project.
El Centro de Innovación, Carlos.
Yes, we are seeing the Innovation Center, Carlos, but the microphone is still open and it's very difficult to hear. In the 10 minutes that I have left, I'm going to talk about this project. It is an innovation initiative that will give room to the climate agenda, to the implementation and all the stakeholders in order to see how we can have the innovation from the secretary when we have made the summary reports of the national plans, I mean the NDCs. We have been able to observe that there is an ambition gap with regards to as of things established by science and actions announced by the countries. To give a graphic example, science asks us to reduce up to 45% the emissions of sectors established in IPCC reports for 2030. And out of this 45%, the emission has only reached 16%. So with that, we cannot continue with this path of 1.5 established by the Paris Agreement. So there's a need to raise the ambition to what science establishes. For that reason, one of the reflections made in the Secretariat of Climate Change is to see the role of innovation, but also the design of long-term strategies and how the ambition is presented by countries. And we believe there is an important opportunity to change the narrative of the national action plans, seeing what we need, particularly from the human needs objectives like housing, nutrition, and health, among others. And among others, the sector of access instead of mobility, and other sectors like having minimum human conditions to have a life that will enable 10 billion people to live in a sustainable manner, but with a good life quality. If we see the objectives 2050 based in the needs and not in what we consider as possible to decarbonize the existing sectors, assuming that they continue on 2050, we have some room, we have a bigger room for innovation. In conclusion, if we see this space from the point of view of needs, it will establish request where innovators could work by establishing a market that could give much more opportunities of action and funding to innovators. There is a vicious cycle since the needs are not clearly established from the country, so this opportunity of innovators is not generated to take care of these demands. And if there's no innovation, the needs cannot be established as well. So the idea is with this paradigm, solve this paradigm of needs and innovation, we could expand the space for action and innovation. And to do so, we have created this center to favor this space. We will see several combinations of innovation beyond the technology ones. We also want to see how these enabling aspects, such as business models, finances, innovations related to policies, and the use of resources can be included. And that includes the capacity building. When I heard about the work of the base team, this is a very interesting case where many of these enabling aspects are combined. Just to give you a graph of the context we are talking about, this is a graph exercise. We want to move the agenda towards a solution-based agenda. Currently, we have worked hard in the transport sector, moving the decarbonization agenda of the vehicle sector. It is necessary, but it's not enough. So our scheme proposes to see beyond the transport sector. So I'm referring to one level would be mobility, another one will be access, understanding the needs. We have to have access to some products and services. I don't know, at the level of society in cities, but also in rural areas, we have a bigger space for innovation, particularly if we take into account not only the urban design aspect that show an important potential for innovation and use of materials, but also the use of digital alternatives that will help us to have access to products and services in a more aligned manner in relation to the Paris Agreement. But this is just one example, but there is other examples that apply. For example, the housing sector, where we could play much more with carbon-free materials. If we think on alternatives to the sector of cement, for example. So there is a bigger range of innovation. We are working with housing projects according to bamboo and other aspects of the SDGs, SDGs to work in a more sustainable manner using projects of reforestation or maintenance or restoration of ecosystems and all the benefits associated to that. It is a new framework that will give an innovation space where innovators could work with the corresponding request. I would like to graph this as a group of solutions going beyond the technological solutions, but that look for several modules. We are working in several modules that integrated may create more opportunities for the implementation of a demo of some innovative progress, but also to escalate them to a faster and more accessible level. So this will be uh, on a modular manner aligned to uh, what we're going to connect them. We started with the cities, but then and later to the subnational units of countries and regions. In order to facilitate these databases and to enable this space for you all to be able to participate in the innovation center, we have two strategies. One is the digital platform. We're working with partners such as the Global Agreement with Mayors or Climate Kick and Mission Innovation, among many other partners. And with that, we are developing the database of requests through a digital platform, but also offering spaces for dialogues in the COPs as well as in the climate weeks. So this is one example of the pavilion that we have for the COP27. This is an example of the platform. First module, we hope we're going to launch the first module during the COP. It will be available on our web page. Those are the examples of dialogues we have had. We had last year, I'm sorry. Those are the dialogues that we had last year in order to progress. Excuse me, I lost my voice. We will have the pavilion, as I commented. The dialogues will continue, and this will take place in Sharm el-Sheikh in November. And our pavilion is positioned there, but we will be really delighted to learn about your request and the participants to keep them active in the use of the platform and innovation ideas. We're going to have a series of challenges in the form of hackathon for young people with 6 categories and many announcements in 3 special matters regarding food production, green hydrogen, and bamboo. So there's going to be 2 weeks of dialogues for innovation. So with this, I would like to invite you to visit our webpage. We will be launching this thing. So this base initiative that will be submitted in detail by my colleague Daniel Magallon. He may have a space and to be closer to the climate action the countries require in their national plans. So with this, I'll leave you some contact information, and we remain available from our regional center for Latin America. We have been systematically working with ICA, and from there we can also offer any information or support that you may require. So we're going to be pavilion neighbors in the COP We are very excited with your presence and to position the agricultural sector within the climate agenda on a much more visible manner. Thank you so much. I remain available. Greetings for you all. Thank you, Carlos, for your intervention, for the explanation provided about the scope, very timely. So we're gonna pay attention to next actions. And now to continue with the program, give the floor to Mr. Daniel Magallon. He is the director of base organization, and he will talk about this uh, thing. He will give us uh, an update. So, Daniel, floor is yours.
Gracias, Katia, y gracias, Carlos, por la presentación. También gracias a ICA por darnos este espacio para hablar de este proyecto. Y como mencionabas, Katia, en este proyecto
And
somos
as you mentioned, we have two organizations that are cooperating. On one hand, we have our partners, HEMPA. It is a research center, and it's quite prestigious here in Switzerland, and it focuses on science and technology and materials. And they have been developing solutions for the industry, mainly in energy, environment, health, and they have a specific area with the scope of reducing waste in food. So we have been working closely with them when it comes to digitalization. And on the other hand, BASE is a Swiss foundation that was created back in 2001, and it's specialized specifically on the development of business models and financial instruments to try and attract investment for climate-related solutions. And in this case, particularly brings us to this current meeting because it focuses mainly on trying to reduce waste that we currently have on the production chain in the agricultural sector, because we have some studies with an estimate of 15% of the agricultural production that we have worldwide. It goes to waste, so it doesn't reach people's tables. So obviously, this is going to have a very strong environmental impact when it comes to mitigation and also on adaptation. So the solution that we are currently looking for is to implement cold systems to reinforce the cold chain in order to extend the useful life and the quality of food that we are harvesting, and also to maximize income mainly for small farmers that usually don't have access to these type of technologies. And and as I was mentioning, we are working jointly on a series of characteristics. On one hand, we have the servitization model, and for the user, in this case, is the executor will not have to invest in a cold chamber, but they will simply have to pay for the service that they are being provided. And in this case, would be depending on the harvest or how much product and how long they want to store it. And on the other hand, we're also trying to integrate renewable energies and also digitalization aspects, also logistics, business models, and financial instruments. As I said, so there are a series of factors that we are trying to put together along with companies in the private sector in countries where this is being implemented. So it is currently being implemented in India, and the team will be able to talk to you about what we're doing. And it is also being replicated in Nigeria, and we see great potential for replication purposes in Latin America and the Caribbean, especially, well, not only for the agricultural sector, but we have been discussing dairy products as well, fishing, and all those services where we require a cold chain. And where it is really important in order to reduce this waste. So I'm not going to go deeper into this because I'm going to let my team talk about the business model and what it consists of. And at the end, we'd be happy to answer your questions too. So now we'll continue with the team for them to start their explanation. Thank you, Daniel, for your introduction. And as you said, we're going to get to know more about the process. So we'll continue with Timran Singh to tell us about the challenges that small farmers face and post-harvest losses and because of course, the sales. So the floor is yours. Please go ahead
Thank you.
with
Thank you
your
so much for having
presentation.
us today. Yeah, I hope everybody can see the presentation. So before we walk you through our solution, your virtual cold chain assistant, I would like to set the context for you in which the solution was developed and the challenges that it aims to address. So if we could go to the next slide. Yes, so as you can see from these two slides, the two countries that we're currently focusing on are India and Nigeria, wherein more than 70% of the population still relies on agriculture for their livelihoods. And approximately 80 to 90% of them are smallholder farmers. So farmers growing crops on less than 2 hectares of land. And what's extremely important to notice is that a large proportion of these people are also women. So our solution aims to target this demographic and tries to move away from centralized to decentralized cooling to cater to this population. In the past years, most policy and solutions have been targeted on increasing agricultural yield. And while this is important, and the FAO also states that you need to increase crop production by 70% to avoid an acute hunger crisis, just boosting crop yields will not be sufficient to gain food security and nutritional security. So approximately 40% of, if we could, yeah, approximately 40% of the food produced in developing countries is lost in the post-harvest and processing phases, primarily due to inadequate storage facilities. And the lack of cooling services harms smallholder farmers mostly in two ways. The first being that at the end of the day, when the smallholder farmers harvest their crops, due to rapid quality loss when these crops are stored and sold at ambient temperatures, they have to distress sell these crops by the end of the day, and they settle for extremely low prices, barely even getting the prices that they come with to transport the crops to the markets. And second is that they increasingly rely on middlemen to sell their crops. So these middlemen show up at the beginning of the sowing season, offer them a price which the farmers easily accept because they want immediate cash and they have no guarantee of cash. And the middlemen are able to then aggregate these crops and sell it for better off-season rates. So most of the profits from the agricultural process then ends up going to the intermediaries and not the farmers themselves. And even in the cases that cold storage does exist, it is centralized, meaning that it is situated in big cities. And these are meant for single commodities, primarily tomatoes and potatoes, which are exported or sold, distributed in large amounts by the central government across the country. So there are three challenges again that arise from this case. The first being that in most of global South, multi-cropping is the most common method of agricultural production, primarily because most small households also grow for subsistence, and there's a wide heterogeneity of crops across farms. So just single commodity rooms do not work for smallholder farmers. What they need is more of a focus on multi-commodity rooms for multi-commodity storage of different types of crops. Secondly, because most of these cold rooms are situated in cities, they are not accessible by poor farmers and especially women who, as I pointed out in the previous slide, make up a large portion of the smallholder farmers. And the third thing is that even in cases where some farmers are able to store their crops in these centralized storerooms in big cities, because they're not able to monitor the quality of the crop, they're often told by these middlemen or intermediaries that their crops did not, basically their crops suffered damage and therefore they had to sell their crops for lower than expected prices. So nobody now really believes in these cooling solutions, which is what our solution tries to address. It moves towards decentralization, multi-commodity storage. Along with decentralization comes opportunities for moving to solar powered rooms, and also an app that helps bridge this trust deficit that currently exists between farmers and using cooling solutions. And with that, I pass the word to Thomas.
Thank you, Simran. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And first, I want to acknowledge Carlos' slide and presentation about solution-oriented approach versus problem-oriented approach. And that's exactly what we are actually using as well in this project. So we are looking at essentially allowing a disruptive, holistic, and systemic innovation by leveraging two mega trends. One is called servitization, so it's business model innovation, and the other one is called digitalization. And what we want to do in this presentation is to show you a bit more how we are actually leveraging these two trends within the project. And this is why the whole team is here. We're a big part of the team to present you what we're doing. The servitization part is essentially business model innovation. So that means allowing farmers to access these sustainable technologies by only paying for the amount of food they store per day in the cold room without having to make any upfront investment themselves. And the digitalization component is related to a mobile application that upcycles market intelligence to make it usable for smallholder farmers. And the benefits of this for farmers are, first of all, to gain access to sustainable cooling, and secondly, to be supported in making better decisions post-harvest. So overall, the objective of the project is essentially to minimize food loss and to maximize the income of the smallholder farmers. Now, I want to do a little dive into what servitization is as a service. Carlos also mentioned it for mobility. This is one example. We have been working on cooling as a service. Why do we need this business model? There are some market barriers which limit the adoption of these new technologies. So this include the higher upfront cost of sustainable technologies, the fact that there is a risk related to performance, or at least a perceived risk, and the fact that whether it's households or farmers or businesses, there's always a competition with other investments that can be made instead. And also when it comes to consuming energy, there's often split incentives between the technology provider that installs the technology and the consumer that actually has to pay for the electricity that is consumed by this technology. So within this context, servitization essentially means instead of selling a product, selling a service. So the technology providers are owners of this equipment and they sell the service that is generated with that equipment. And you have seen this already in other sectors like the Xerox copy machines. Instead of selling the copy machines, they sell copies. So companies can just copy and pay per use. Or the solar sector, where solar panels are not anymore purchased by users, but the kilowatt hours of energy are purchased instead, and the provider takes care of installing it, making sure it works, and the user does not have to think about the risk anymore of these technologies or make the investment. And we have it in mobility, as Carlos mentioned, and now we have it in new sectors of energy efficiency, so compressed air, lighting, and cooling, as well as heating. So we have been working at base in rolling out this model around the world in different sectors, from commercial and industrial air conditioning to refrigeration, and also the agricultural and medical cold chains in different countries, which include Costa Rica, Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, South Africa, and Nigeria and India. So we then saw that this model has a lot of potential to really make an impact in the agricultural cold chain. So that's when we decided to launch this new project with a bigger focus specifically on that sector. As Daniel mentioned before, we are now working in two countries, India and Nigeria. we have the honor to have the representative of one of the companies who is our partner in India, which is Clementine from Orija, and she will explain how we are working in Bihar on the ground. But we're working also with other companies, which include Coolcrop, Colfresh, and Cold Hubs for Nigeria. So just some pictures to give you a little bit an idea. These pilot projects essentially look like this. So the different types of containers, containerized cold rooms which run on solar-powered energy. And we have been supporting to connect the sensors of the room to the mobile application that we have developed. And later you will find out why we need this and what's the benefits. And also we have developed this solution by conducting a lot of conversations with the beneficiaries and conducting workshops to make sure that actually the different feedback that we have collected is integrated into the design of the solution. So that's something that for us is very important. And we have conducted several loops of feedback in which we have improved the solution based on these findings. So now I will give the word to Roberta, who will give a more in-depth insights into what this app is, the digitalization part of the solution.
Thank you, Thomas. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. So a few months back, we have launched our mobile application, which we have called Cultivate. And we have designed Cultivate together with technology providers and cooling users to really make sure that the app is tailored to their needs as much as possible. So on one side, Cultivate is aiming at supporting companies that are offering cold storage to manage the rooms in a more efficient way by providing a digital inventory management system, as well as the ability to remotely monitor the temperature, the revenue, and the occupancy of their cold rooms. In this way, the companies can oversee their operations in a more efficient way, and hopefully this can help them then to scale up, meaning to open new rooms and thus to serve more and more farmers. And on the other side, the app is helping farmers and traders, so different types of cooling users, to better understand how they can leverage cold storage to get the most out of what they produce, both in terms of price realizations and in terms of reducing the food spoilage. And the crucial thing here is really enabling them to better understand the solution so that they can trust it as much as possible. And we are doing this by basically allowing them to monitor the crates that they have in storage and the conditions of the room where the crates are stored. And importantly, Cultivate is also providing them with intelligence and with a support in the decisions that they're taking. For example, by allowing them to understand when is the most appropriate time in which they should come to the room to pick up what they have in storage. And to give you a better feeling of how the app functions, I will now share my screen and basically guide you a bit through the app, how it looks now, so that you can really see what are the main features that we have implemented so far. So let me just do this. I think Tom, yeah, perfect. Here we are. So when you open Cultivate for the first time, this is how it looks like. You basically have two options. Either if it's the first time you're a technology provider and it's the first time that you arrive here, you can basically sign up with this very simple form. So you sign up the company and yourself. And if you have already been here at least once, then what happens is that you can sign in with 3 different roles. The first one is what we name the registered employee. What this means is a person that is managing the cold rooms. It could be, for example, the CEO of the company or anybody else in the management team. And the main task of the registered employees is basically to register their company within the app, which basically means to create the cooling rooms within the app, to invite others to join, and to assign the different operators to the room. And the benefit that they get from using the app is that then they can, after this has been set up, they can monitor remotely what is happening in all the rooms they have without having to physically be there. The second role is the role of the operator, meaning a person that is sitting physically at the room, at the cold room. And this is also the person that is responsible for the interaction with the cooling users, meaning doing the check-in, the checkout operations, receiving the payments. So in this sense, the operator is the main user of Cultivate. So I'm gonna log in here just to show you how the interface looks for this role. Right. First of all, the first thing you see here on top is that you can choose which unit you want to look at, meaning depending on which rooms these operators has been assigned to, he can basically switch and see all of them, even though he's, of course, not physically present at all of them. And so by changing the unit, this is what you see. So this is basically the dashboard that contains all the information about what is currently in storage. So what this means here is that you see that a given farmer has brought 5 crates of apple. They have been in storage for they've been in storage for, okay, so let's, in this case, yeah. So we are here. So John, a farmer or a trader, has brought 3 crates of guava. They have been in storage for 1 day. And what the color code means is that they represent basically the remaining quality of the produce. So for how many days, it is based on a model, and it tells us how many days the produce is still going to be good for at the temperature of the room. So what's very important to highlight here is that by integrating temperature sensors within the Cultivate app, you can basically monitor what's the temperature inside of the room in real time without being there. And also these data points are going to be used by this model, this time to pick up model, which constantly updates himself to reflect what's the current state of the temperature inside of the room, so that it can predict which is the remaining current quality or time to pick up of each of the different crates that you have in storage. Another thing that can be useful is that the operators and the registered employees are able to monitor what is the current occupancy of the room and also the predicted occupancy in the next days, so they can better understand how to optimize the operations. And now just want to quickly show you, let's imagine that there is a farmer who arrives at a cold room and the operator wants to start to check in. How this is done? Basically, just by clicking on this activity button, you can initiate a check-in by selecting who is the farmer that has arrived. Let's assume it was John, and that he brought 5 crates of bananas. So I can just add 5 crates. You can adjust the weight if needed. If John already knows for how many days, maybe he knows that the market is 3 days, so he's gonna be sure that he's gonna pick them up in 3 days. He can put this here. That's not mandatory. And then we have 2 quick questions to estimate which is the initial quality of the produce. And then by confirming, what you will see is that basically this we can skip for the sake of time. What you will see in a second is that this is going to be added to, here it's going to be added as a new item in the dashboard. And also the time to pick up has been calculated. So this is information that then you can pass over to John maybe before he leaves the room. In a similar way, you can start a checkout. I'm not going to show you, but basically just by clicking on the crates and checkout, you can basically do the checkout and the payment. And the only last thing that I want to show you here is that basically both the operators and the registered employee have complete visibility on what are the tasks that have been, or like the operations that have been happening at each specific room over time. So in this sense, the app really replaces the manual registers that are currently used by the operators that are physically at the room and so are very difficult to access by anybody who's not there. And I just want to conclude mentioning briefly that, as I said in the beginning, there is a third user type, which is the cooling user. These are either farmers or traders, retailers. And in the next release of the app, they are also going to be able to log in if they have a phone. What is already operational now is that the operators can communicate with the cooling users via SMS. And this is something that we will still keep as an option because we want this app to really be inclusive and in this sense to also serve farmers who might not have a smartphone yet. But in case they do have a smartphone, what they're going to be able to do is they're going to be able to better understand what they have in storage where and what is the remaining quality for everything that they have. I will stop sharing and I think we can go back to the slides just to conclude. Thank you, Thomas. So I just want to conclude by saying that the app is freely available on Android, iOS, and also on desktop, as I just showed you. And I really want to stress the fact that even though we have done this project and piloted this so far, mostly in India and in Nigeria, the app can actually be used in any country in the world. So I would really encourage you, if you're interested, to just go to this URL, basically, and just download it and try it out for yourself. And just in terms of outlook on the next steps, so we're currently working on improving the app and adding more and more features. One being the interface for the farmers, as I just explained, and the other one being machine learning models that can provide market intelligence for the users of the app. And I'll stop here and give the floor to Tess, who's gonna present us a bit more about the science that is behind all the models and the mobile application.
Thank you, Roberta. Thanks, I'm very happy to be here. And as Roberta explained, I will give you a look behind the scenes, how we estimate this time to pick up. So our aim is to help save food, to help give farmers products they can have, let's say, a better price for. So how do we do that? We would like to know how fruit and vegetables age. Is this simple? No, it is actually not, because you have, in our case, many different fruit and vegetables of many different farmers coming at many different times, and all they're put in one single cold room, for example, sometimes. So it becomes very complex on how to predict how different fruit and vegetables age of every single farmer. The first thing we could do is we could say we look at the temperature in the cold room, which is available. So you see the temperature data there over time. So there are sometimes peaks, there are sometimes door openings, sometimes the door stays closed for a longer time. That's a first indication on how fruits and vegetables inside would age. And then you can look at a certain time your fruit and vegetable was inside to predict how long it would remain good. What we do is we take it a step further. So we build so-called digital twins of different fruits and vegetables, which is a digital computational simulation model, which actually runs in the computer in the background or on your app. And it takes the data from the cold store and it uses it to predict how fruit and vegetables would age in your cold store. So the virtual fruit would drift along your real fruit, age in a similar way. And with that, we can actually have much more information. We don't have temperature information. We have upcycled this information to, for example, mass loss, remaining shelf life, changes in firmness. We can also do changes in color and so on. So we get much more complementary information, which is very difficult to measure in the field. The nice thing is that this complements a lot, how should I say, the observations in the field. We should not only trust these models only, so it's good to always go in the cold room and check from time to time, but at least we have more information to make better decisions on. If we combine this with market intelligence, we could, for example, sell at the point where you get the best price and your product is still at the acceptable quality. So we built these digital twins for many different fruit and vegetables. And just to stress, this is a kind of an indication on how different fruit and vegetables would age. You have different harvest seasons, different harvest practices, so there is some variability, but it gives us more information to make decisions on. We are working currently on having these digital twins of entire cold stores so that we, for every farmer, for every crate, could predict how they age, which is work of the coming years. And that's actually a very nice scope we're looking forward to. That's for cold store providers and for farmers. That's if you have a cold store. The question is now, where should you put cold stores if you're scaling up? So what we have also developed is trying to make more out of the data which is available in India and in Nigeria for cold storage providers to maybe make a little bit better decisions on where to put future cold stores. There is already a lot of data available on, for example, market locations, on roads, on mobile coverage, and so on in cities, on the weather, and so on. So what we did is, in an open access tool on Google Earth Engine, we grouped all this data together in many different layers, and you have actually a lot of different, let's say, multi-parameter data, which you can use to maybe make better decisions on, because you can use all this different information. So This is something we made available. It's only based on open source data, so we did not have to pay for data to make these maps. We have it now for 2 countries. You can scale it also for other countries if you have the information available on markets and so on. So this is what we worked on. It's to identify better locations for cooling facilities. It's to help cold storage providers to make better decisions in the future. Then I would like to pass the word to Clementine, who is actually providing these very nice facilities to help save food.
Yep, thank you, Tess, and thanks to everyone for having me today. So my name is Clementine, and I'll be sharing the ground perspective as one of the partners of BASE and EMPA. And so our company is called Urja, and we're actually a farming as a service company. So we provide service-based innovations for different types of applications. One of them is cooling. So here in the photo, you can see a photo of our pilot cooling as a service project. This is in a place called Muzaffarpur in Bihar in northern India, and it's been installed for the last roughly 18 months. It's a solar-powered cold storage. So briefly on the technology, we chose to operate it as a mainly as a solar-powered unit for climate reasons, although it does have a grid backup as well as thermal energy storage for high reliability, since of course we're trying to beat the reliability of ambient temperature, so we need to have a reliable cooling source. It is a mixed commodity cold storage. So we chose to implement this for the use of farmers who would be growing locally grown fruits and vegetables, which are it's one of the hot spots in India for growing horticulture. But in practice, we've also seen it adopted for storage of lots of fruits and vegetables that are not necessarily local, but require cooling at the local level. So Tess briefly mentioned this. One of the challenges is deciding where to install the cold storage. And this is a learning actually from our pilot. So this location, although you can't see it here, it's sort of halfway between the farm and the nearest marketplace. So it is accessible to both farmers and traders, but in the future, we would recommend installation of these types of cold storages at the marketplace or the point of sale of the fruits, the vegetables, or whatever you are selling, because that way it becomes, more easily adoptable by, at the market gate. Briefly on the business model, I think Thomas already explained it very well, but it is cooling as a service. Our aim here was to work with low-income users. So we mainly target users who have less than $100 of income per month. And in fact, they usually have much less income than that. So we're talking about small and marginal farmers, but also what you would call petty traders who earn a livelihood from selling farmers' produce. And we've been successful in reaching that user base because firstly, the cooling is priced in an affordable way so that they can earn a benefit by extending the shelf life and by selling at a later date, but also by reducing food losses because they're able to, avoid having to throw away some of their produce. And another unexpected benefit was that if they're storing, this is the importance of location, if the user is storing in the marketplace itself, it means they also save on transport costs to and from the market. And so that adds another layer of savings. So yes, and just to briefly talk about the results we've seen, we're in the early stages of, although it's been operational for 18 months, we have quite a bit of data now on capacity utilization. So what we can say is that it's been used throughout the year. There are, of course, peaks of higher demand post-harvest, but then there are also periods where even though there's no local production, there's been produce from other areas of the country, like apples, for example, which have been stored for longer periods of time. This type of cold storage has been used to store about 30 to 35 different types of fruits and vegetables. And that has been its advantage. It's very versatile, but also operationally, it's a challenge because cooling is a very new introduction in rural areas of India, as it is in many parts of the world. And so a lot of hand-holding is required of the end users so that they know, so both the operators and the farmers or traders, so that they know how to best use cooling to get a benefit. So, how long is the shelf life of this produce at this temperature, and which commodities can you store together and which should you avoid storing together? Staying on the results, so yes, we have seen that we're able to decrease the post-harvest losses by at least 10 to 15%, possibly more. And also we have seen a trend in increased income of the end user through the financial benefits. And like I said, another big learning was that not only farmers, but also traders are expected to be major adopters of this solution because of course, their involvement in the food value chain. We also see potential to keep scaling this up. We've recently installed 2 more cold rooms. And especially, you know, I wanted to say that even though there are some operational challenges in terms of training the end users and you know, making them become familiar with this multiple commodity storage, the business model innovation of avoiding the upfront cost for the end user and giving them access to cooling as a service is very transformative in terms of reducing the food losses and driving down the carbon emissions from agriculture, but also in terms of increasing the end user income. So that's a brief overview of our pilot, and I will pass back to the rest of the team to complete the presentation.
Thank you, Clementine. I'll take over just to close. So this was it on our side. We want to show you a video of the project, which we are releasing essentially today. So you're the first public audience, and it's an honor for us to show this to you today. And just before I do this, I want to make an announcement that also today we are opening a call for applications for a new program that we call the Your Virtual Cold Chain Assistant Incubator. So it's a program in which companies from around the world, which includes obviously Latin America, can apply and can receive free technical assistance from us to test the app and to implement the business model and to essentially start offering cooling as a service and use the Cultivate app to do so. So the link, I'm realizing it's on the slide, it's your VCCA, so the 3 first letters of your virtual cold chain assistant, your VCCA.org. And I think we will send this in a follow-up email. So now I will stop sharing this screen and I will share the video.
India currently faces drastic weather variations because of climate change. Record-breaking heat waves continue to sweep the subcontinent year after year. India's farmers bear the harshest brunt of the unusually warm weather conditions. 65% of India's 1.38 billion inhabitants live in rural areas, 70% of whom are farmers. And the soaring temperatures increase the perishability of their agricultural produce. India is the second largest producer of fruits and vegetables globally, but nearly 40% of the fresh produce gets spoiled due to gaps in the cold chain. In total, 40 billion tons of produce worth $13 billion is lost before reaching the consumers annually. The reduced shelf life of the produce forces smallholder farmers and petty traders to distress sell at low prices, resulting in significant income loss.
हम लोग का पास समस्या यही है कि मैंने जैसे आज तोड़ के लाए हैं, जो बेच के ख़त्म नहीं कर पा रहे हैं, नहीं ख़त्म हुआ तो वो सड़ जाता है, वेस्ट हो जाता है, हम लोग को उचित रेट नहीं मिलता है.
So we wanted to give you a little preview of this video. This one does not have the subtitles, so we didn't want to show you the whole version in Hindi, but the video is available on our website. So we will send you a link as well, so that you can have a look at this video. And with this, I'll give back the word to Katja.
Muchas gracias, Thomas,
Thank you, Thomas, for the presentations, as well as Roberta, Sinjantes, and Clementine for these interesting presentations. The idea is to have some questions. I see a couple of questions in the chat. If you have any additional question, please add it on the chat to have some 5 minutes for questions and answers before starting with the round table with the participations of the region and the ICAS colleagues. So I'm going to give space for these couple of questions that we have here. The first one says, so go ahead. And the second question is about the cold room. If
so, why the location of cold room taken into consideration? Entonces, tal vez si por favor.
So maybe if you could answer these couple of questions, and we'd like to see if we have other questions from the participants. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thomas, do you want to respond?
Sure. I'll start with the question about the multilingual question. So the app is actually being translated into the local languages and the regions where we are piloting it. So in this case, in India, we have it in English, in Hindi, and in the local language in Odisha. So, and if we would implement this in Latin America, we would obviously translate this into Spanish, and for Brazil, potentially Portuguese. So that's for, please, Tess.
Yeah, maybe I can take the question on the cold room. So maybe there is a misunderstanding. There are two different things. One is digital twins, which we use to see how fruit and vegetables in a cold room age. So together with the real fruit and vegetables. The second thing I showed you was this map, and is independent of that. That's to really look where would be the best location to put a cold storage room, where of course climate can play a role as well. I don't know if this is rather clear. These are two separate things with two different goals.
I think just to add to that, if I can, I think the reason why the location of the cold room is important is also for operational reasons. So the idea is that it should be accessible to target users. So of course, depending on where those users are, it's often assumed that, you know, if farmers are supposed to be the end users of a cold storage, then it should be put at the farm level. But our experience would disagree with that. And we believe it may be more important to put it at the place of sale. So simply so that, you know, at the point of sale, it can be conveniently stored there overnight, not because, I mean, the assumption is often that farmers are putting 100% of their harvested produce in a cold room, but a lot of farmers are obviously squeezed for income and they may actually try to liquidate as much of their produce, i.e. sell it as quickly as possible. So what we found that the unsold portion of their produce, so that's maybe 10 to 20%, may be stored there. And that also gives opportunity for more users to use it. And so again, having it in a central location at a marketplace has been more effective for us.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I have a third question.
The reaction of the farmers to the cost of using the cold room. Are the costs effectively covered by the reduction in losses?
Should I take this question? So in our case, it's been a pilot project, but I can share our experience. So the reaction has been, we've charged it per crate per day. To give you an indication, it's been roughly around 10 rupees, so 10 Indian rupees per crate per day. I'll let you convert that to your local currency if it's not rupees, which is highly affordable. Nevertheless, there has been some initial, skepticism about, but that's also because the end users are very price sensitive about, how will they still get a benefit. So again, some, explaining and understanding of the costs that they might face, and also the potential financial benefit of storing the cold storage needs to be done. So how we approach this is we looked at, in a given location, maybe the 10 or 15 commodities that are most likely to be stored, and analyze the price, how much the price in the market would vary from season to season. But also simply if you're losing some of it, you may still be able to, by paying a small proportion of the ultimate sale price, you'll still be able to make a profit. But yes, it's done bearing in mind affordability is the primary concern. Otherwise, no user would use the cold storage.
If I could add to that, in some cases also smallholder farmers come together and are able to aggregate their products. And when they're able to aggregate them, being able to sell them in bulk to markets or retailers also helps them negotiate better because they have a higher bargaining power. It also directly connects them to, say, retailers. So it does help them get more money than they otherwise would if they were going through intermediaries.
Muchas gracias. Y una última pregunta que tengo también acá.
Thank you. And a final question that I have on the chat.
A difference in the types of farmers more rapidly adopting this innovation, youth, women, and others.
¿Y adultos?
Simran, did you understand the full question? It's about youth and women, right? Adopting the cold storage. Or would you be able to repeat the question? Sorry, Katya.
Sí, claro, dice. Have you noticed a difference in the types of farmers more rapidly adopting this innovation?
So I can speak briefly on that, but Simran, yeah, maybe you can come in. So in our case, so what I meant to say was mostly the users have been for the cooling service. We're only just starting to pilot the Cultivate app, so I can't speak so much about that. But simply for cooling as a service, although we have tried very hard to target women as end users, and we, have women in our field team, and we, also tailor the trainings to make them accessible to women farmers. In practice, in the context we operate in India, it's been quite difficult to get women to use the cold storage. Also because the majority of the traders who happen to be sitting and selling the produce happen to be men. So I think that's an area for gender inclusivity. Even if the service is accessible to women, it still tends to be that's in our context, difficult in practice to get it adopted by women. That's also just because of the very sort of patriarchal social setup. But that doesn't mean it's actually been designed to make it easier for women farmers or traders to be able to use it.
Just to add to that, the policy context also matters a lot. So in the case of Bihar in India, there has been, like Clementine pointed out, where we've tried to get women involved is, even in the case of Urja, the operator is a woman that's hired from the community to be able to make it a safe space to attract more women. But in the case of Odisha, for example, where there is a budding environment for self-help groups and farmer producer organizations, a large part of the cold rooms are used by women, again, because there's a strong policy push also to get self-help groups empowered and to get them to use these cold rooms. So in some contexts, it has worked out, thanks to also government support. But in others, we are trying our best with capacity building efforts to try to mobilize more women to come and use these rooms and get them to commercialize their crops as well.
Muchas gracias, Roberta y Simran.
Thank you, Roberta and Simran. There's a final question. And after that, we will move to the round table. The use of a cold room generates a cost to farmers. Even assuming this cost, are they benefited with sales in other seasons of the year?
I can take this one. there's two ways that farmers can benefit economically from the cold room. One is that they do make losses today. So some of the food that they have to sell gets lost if they cannot sell it at the end of the day. And the cold room helps in keeping this food fresh so they can actually sell it the next day. So even though there is a small fee to use the cold room, the money they will get from selling the crop instead of throwing it away is a gain, a direct gain for the farmers. So that's one option. The second option is more longer term storage. So we see this, for example, in the apple supply chain in India, in which the apple price is seasonal. So that means that the price increases significantly after some months. So if it's possible to leverage this, so to store the crops for maybe 2, 3, 4 months, even though it comes at a cost, the gains for the farmer will be more than sufficient to pay back that payment and also to increase the income. So these are the two ways farmers can benefit them economically.
Muchas gracias, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas. And I would also like to thank you for all your ideas and information that you have provided us with, which is highly valuable. And I would like to thank Daniel, Simra, Thomas, Roberta, Tess, and Clementine for this session and for answering to our questions from our participants and from the people watching us on social media. And now for the next 20 minutes, we'll have a segment to try and better understand the context of Latin America and the Caribbean for this type of things. And for this, I would like to welcome my colleagues from IECA. As moderator, we were going to have the president of the Kelly Bukowski, but she is traveling, so I'll act as moderator, and afterwards we're going to have some conclusions. So in that sense, to start with the roundtable, how to link small farmers to the market and energy services. And we'll start with Mario Leon, currently the program manager for territorial development and family agriculture from IECA, and with a great experience in these topics, for him to provide us with the context and characterization of smallholder producers in Latin America. So Mario, welcome, the floor is yours. Thank you, Katia. Good morning or good afternoon, and even maybe good evening for some of you. So if you allow me, what I have here is my presentation.
Ya presento. Aquí vamos. Me avisan, por favor, si ven.
Please let me know if you can see my screen. Yes, but can you switch to presentation mode, please?
Ahí. Ok, bueno, muchas gracias, Katia.
Thank you, Katia. And as part of the program, I would like to do some reflections for the characterization of the smallholder producers in Latin America and the Caribbean, based on some agricultural census. For the case of the small and medium-sized producers in the region, 80% consists of productive units that pertain to families. So out of 21 million units, 80% corresponds to a smallholder producers and growers, and is distributed based on the productive capacities and the use of technology that each of these units is going to work on as part of the productive systems. And 56%, approximately 12 million are family agriculturists or farmers, and that's part of their livelihoods. And we also have another percentage that somehow have some sort of a surplus that can be traded or commercialized, and to the extent that these small farmers adhere to some sort of membership or association or cooperative, then this will be easier. And this is where it's important to take a look at this goal. And obviously, climate change effects, well, we all know, we are all aware of what has been going on nowadays on many territories. So we have elevated temperatures, and when we don't have these cool chains, sometimes many of these products go to waste because of the high level of acceleration on their ripening process. So I think that it's important to go deeper into the use of these technologies and the use of these tools, rather, because of the fact that it is not going to allow only for growers to store their products, but as has been said, they can start predicting for, I don't know, time commercialization in the light of each of their own products. And this is going to allow them to extend their commercialization periods and to generate a more income. So based on some statistics and national census, this is the estimated of the different farm based on data from different agricultural census. And in here you can see how in the case of Guatemala, for example, 78% of the productive units are of less than 1 hectare. And if we go to the agricultural land surface used by size of the productive unit or farm, then you can see that in the case of Guatemala, 13% is less than 1 hectare, and between 1 and 2, they have 7.5%. And this tells us in general terms that we have countries where obviously when it comes to agriculture itself, in countries where 10% is obviously the GDP, or it exceeds the 10%, the vulnerability in the production of food is higher, and it is more severe and serious, and should be duly attended to in a differentiated manner through differentiated policies, for example. And if we take a look at some of the statistics that have been gathered by AICA, approximately 75% of small and mid-sized growers are food offerers, and there are countries where 80%, for example, for corn and beans, and excluding soy, of course, are produced by small and medium-sized growers, and between 27 and 67% of these productive units, or this typology of production, is responsible in many countries, case by case, of supplying the basic food list. So when it comes to the typology, there are some simple typologies that are normally used by producers when they talk about family agriculture, for example, that can be capitalized or consolidated. So these are products that somehow are going to have some sort of link with a surplus that they can take to the market. So there is an intermediate classification that is the one in transition, that somehow are in the conditions to be able to go to the consolidated category. And there is a lower category that is like peripheral, that has no capital, or it's just for the means for subsistence and for internal consumption, and they almost have no surplus at all. So there's another complex classifications that gather some attributes, for example, that they are capitalized with frequent access to market, or not that capitalized with sporadic access to markets, and growers that want to have their own livelihoods with no access to markets, and those that have no land, or other types of farmers that obviously are rural workers that sometimes live in rural areas, and this is a way to supplement their income with the other agricultural activities that they use in other types of productive units. And the most commonly used is, as I mentioned, the family agriculture that they use as a livelihood. And we have a high consumption predominance with a limited commercial insertion, and we have the transition one for those that have some access to productive resources, and it's aimed at high consumption. And these are going to the markets, and the one that is consolidated, when we're talking here about productive units that have a focus on their own markets with a potential for consumption goods to try and improve the production conditions and productivity. And when it comes to some of the variables that we currently use to try and typify all of this, and this is going to be a decision made by each of the countries, and it's related to finances or access to resources, for example, loans, and what is the orientation or the productive vocation, the level of income as part of the rural basic basket, what the source of fund, and the capitalization that we can measure in the use of equipment, for example, or machinery and technologies. And something important is anything related to the association level. And as part of that line of work, we have been working with an association as an instrument to improve the competitiveness of family agriculture. And in this sense, we have a link with the cooperatives, which would be a level of association with some specific attributes. In the case of Latin America, we talk about 108,000 active cooperatives that are dedicated to agriculture. And the idea for this type of organizations of memberships is to be able to reinforce the level of negotiations and to try and concentrate some offers and reduce the transaction costs and contribute to the increase of efficiency on these chains. And as we have mentioned, for this type of tools, for the cooling chains, for example, this is going to work fine in the case of organizations that are somehow consolidated. And along that same line, for the past 2 years, we have been working on a joint program with the Cooperativa de las Américas, a strategic partner of the Institute, in a digitalization of products for the family agriculture cooperatives. And maybe in here we can find some sort of bridge or a connection to everything that we have been listening to, because here we have two initiatives currently working in 5 countries in the region, in Central America, in Latin America, and 3 in Central America through cooperation. And I think that there are very good opportunities along these lines. Well, that is it for me, Katia, and thank you. Thank you for this regional context where production at a small scale and growers is so important. If you have any questions or comments, please send them to the chat. And now we will listen to my colleague, Agustin Torroa, and he's a technical specialist for the bioeconomy and innovation program at the Institute. And the idea is for him to tell us about the importance of energy services in Latin America and the associated context. So welcome and thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Thank you. Because of time reasons, my presentation is going to be really short about the importance of energy services in Latin America and the Caribbean. My intention is not to touch all the points included in this title. Otherwise, it will take us several seminars. I'm going to try to focus the presentation almost exclusively in the access to electricity in rural areas and how this can be supplemented or replaced through renewable energies. In this presentation, you can see in the left all the sources of energy, all the sources used to produce energy, and differentiations between renewable energies and non-renewable energies. And maybe the most important thing is to see the column on the right. We have secondary energy. So this is the energy that has gone through a process where we can build. The two more important are the electric energy, and but that could be stored and used. Unlike the electricity, the capacity of storage is quite reduced to batteries or any other kind of storage. Notice, please, that this first phenomenon that we observed, access of population per quintile of income to the electric energy, and also the differentiation between rural and urban population. The graph clearly shows that the poorer the population, first quintile is 20% poorer in rural areas, more than 17% of the population, more than 17% of the poorest quintile do not have access to electricity versus 3.3% compared to urban population. And we see a proportional relation between income in rural areas as well as in urban areas. And income per quintile or per inhabitant versus access to electric energy. We see that the population located in rural areas is over the mean of not access to electricity compared to urban areas, where the mean, we have the national mean. Can we palliate this non access to electricity in rural areas? We found that one of the practical manners is the use of renewable energy sources for those areas. And we basically found 4 uses that could be given to these renewable energies that substitute electricity power in areas that are not connected. And it is related to the productive use as well as to the well-being in rural areas. The first use for the renewable energy substituting electric connectivity are houses. So they use electricity for lighting for the radio, to recharge the cell phone, and there are also solar thermotanks. In the case of technology that do not produce electricity but is used to heat water, there are many rural schools without access to electricity. In this case, the renewable energies allow the connection to technologies and elements related to teaching, besides better well-being in the schools or the teaching places. There are broad productive uses, renewable energies to replace the electricity grids. And here we can see many applications, wind pumps and solar pumps, small factories, refrigeration technology, among other several applications. And a fourth use, which is what they call micro networks. They are small populations, rural small populations without the electricity. And in general, they can organize small wind, solar networks or water use networks to supply energy to these small rural agglomerations. In some cases, it is used for health, for the health of the population. So what you will see now are some examples of concrete projects. This is a couple of projects in Argentina where they use solar panels to supply electricity to houses, to rural schools, and to different productive uses. Here you can see an example connected to the replacement of a battery. This is another example of a village without access to electricity, with some solar panels we're able to do what I mentioned before. This is a micro network. And some brief conclusions to respect the time. This is related to what I said at the beginning, that the poorest rural populations are those with less access to electricity. It is important to expand the use of electricity in rural areas. So renewable energies are excellent alternatives for these places that are not connected. And then something that I did not mention for time reasons, but I would like to mention it here. The electric sources or electric energy is not the only secondary source for energy supply. There are others that work and that work pretty well. Traditionally, with different traditions and different uses, and they may be used with several purposes. For example, biodigesters, which are quite disseminated technology. It may be used to treat waste and to ongoing supply of biomass. In addition to this, there is a range of bioenergy broader, known as traditional bioenergies, biomass without too many processing, and the ones that are considered modern. So biomass with some treatment that make them to be better used. And there are many examples from liquid up to solid biofuels or gas biofuels that with some treatment led them to have a great use, particularly in not connected areas or in areas where the access to electricity is because of logistic matters. It's difficult and they have some complicated points. And of course, linking the energy aspect with the cooling that our colleagues mentioned in their past presentations. So the linkage is more than evident. So Katia, to respect the time, I conclude here. Thank you very much. Thanks to you, Agustin. Now let's go to the next intervention from our colleague Daniel Rodriguez. Daniel is the program manager of international trade and regional integration in ICA. He has several years of experience in the region. And so Daniel, please puts us in context regarding small growers and their access to international markets in the region, and also in the capacity building aspect. Go ahead, Daniel, floor is yours. Greetings, warm greetings to the organizers, the speakers, and the participants. It is a pleasure for me to be here with you. The objectives of the program is to support producers, growers to take advantage of the commercial opportunities as a result of the trade agreements and the integration processes. When we talk about capacity building, I'll say there are two topics that are quite pertinent when we talk about small growers. The first one is the one related to capacity building, the associative capacity building, and the second one, business capacity building. When we talk about associative capacities, the big issue on one hand is how to join offers, how to collect the offers for them to have access to better customers, more stable customers, and here organizing organizations or cooperatives of producers that let them to make good use of these economies of scale when they buy products in conjunction and they favor their position. The negotiating position is very important. There is a case that we need to take into account for growers, organizations, work. We have seen two elements. One, the organization and the efforts need to be transformed into an economic gain for the organization to survive. But also, if they are united, there is this big opportunity to develop services that may be used not only by the members, but also offered to other stakeholders in the chain. On one hand, they strengthen fidelity of the members towards the organization, and it also allows to generate additional income. So building the sustainability of the organization. As a first conclusion, what you showed us before really appears as an interesting option to assess by producers organization as a service for the members, and also as a way to link and to generate income. The other big topic that normally we work, and I believe Mario mentioned this a while ago, is the capacity, the business capacity building. When we talk about the small growers or producers, we start with something that may look simple, and it is the importance to have to focus on the market. So to focus on the market is just about thinking about what is it the consumers are looking for and how they can help to satisfy it. By small producers, there is a trend to believe that the production is made by tradition, and that they are not always the best products to trade in the international markets. And to support them in this internationalization process, I'll say that there are two elements that we try to support. One, identification and compliance of the requirements of international markets for products to get into the countries, but also tools that help them to identify the tastes and preferences of consumers, which are, at the end of the day, those who will buy the products. So, since we started some years ago with the different shocks as a result of the COVID and the war, and of course, impact as a result of the rain and the droughts, at the regional level, there is an important interest in promoting intra-regional trade. For you to have an idea, less than 14% of agri-food exports are exported to the region. So the countries have an interest in promoting this trade. One of the biggest challenges is related to logistics. Logistics inside the region is not the best one. And of course, to improve the cold chains could help, not only to promote this trade in the region, to reduce the losses, as you mentioned, and in some cases even to favor the relationship they have with the buyers. Because you know, export products, when they do not arrive with the quality appropriate, are really punished by the buyer. So basically, I believe this is an initiative that could be interesting, and in ICA, we can act as customers. When we talk about small producers and linkage of products to international markets, associativism is an important element. The generation of services help to make customers loyal and to increase gains. So we are in front of an interesting possibility to disseminate this service to the region. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel, for this linkage that you already made of context and application. Now I'm going to give the floor to my colleague, Federico Vert. Federico is the manager in the innovation area. He's a senior consultant specialized in digital agriculture from the Institute, and he has a broad knowledge in the topic. Federico, floor is yours. If you can talk about the situation, how this thing links to the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Katia. It is a pleasure to be able to be here and being a part of this workshop with all our colleagues. And in 5 minutes, I want basically to convey to you two general concepts that hopefully can be used for an exchange even today or afterwards. First, there are some concepts that somehow are going to set the context for anything that has been exchanged so far. First, the digital transformation are going to transform the chain, and that is something that we've seen on different industries, and how the progressive introduction of digital technologies end up transforming the value chains completely. And I think that that is what we call digital transformation. So technically, it is defined as the removal of the model of a change, of a value change on the basis of integrating digital solutions, and especially focusing on user preferences or consumer preferences. So this digital transformation is more than the adoption of digital technologies. And those that are dedicated to study the theory emphasize this last aspect of digital transformation that puts at the core of the scene users or consumers. And having said that, there are two current essential impacts that digital transformation generates. On one hand, we have a more fluent or expedite and synchronized feedback between supply and demand for any product or service. And in this case, we're talking about agribusiness products. And in second place, a higher efficiency in processes, mainly productive processes, but not only those, but also when it comes to logistics and trade. And in relation to that higher feedback between the supply and demand that is allowed by digital transformation, we have three important services that can be aligned, or important effects that can be aligned with the main proposal of this webinar, which is related to more income and the reduction of losses. So first, we have a better synchronization between consumption and production. It is faster, more expedited, because it is better adapted. And of course, it will result in a higher efficiency on one hand and greater customer satisfaction, and having less transactional costs, and having less information, lack of symmetry. So these three events are going to result in less post-harvest losses and higher income. So as of now, we're going to have more efficiency in the productive processes, and this is going to generate greater impact. And what's most important is a greater income for farmers. We have two concrete examples on how digital technology is moving in this sense, with some concrete experiences regarding what they are generating. We have digital technical assistance through the connectivity of mobile devices that need not be smart, and different experiences worldwide demonstrate that assisting growers through digital channels has definitely improved their yield, their performance, and has reduced the impact of their practices on climate change. And at the same time, but not less important, the digital trade, because these allowed, and we have documented experiences in many countries in the world, because these allowed for shorter and more efficient trains. And also, among other benefits, we can mention the improvement of the particular works that we have seen of the income of growers. So as for the first concept, digital transformation is going to change the value chain, and they are transforming all the food systems. And the second concept is where we are currently in Latin America and the Caribbean in terms of this digital transformation of the systems, because we had an analog, but now we have all these systems that are completely digital. And currently we are beginning this roadmap, because of course we'll have some differences and some digital technologies like weather information and some other apps that are quite simple, that currently have a very interesting level of adoption through different production sectors. Because as Mario was showing, there are other more sophisticated technologies, and maybe they are more similar to the ones that we were looking at earlier, like sensors that we have and things like this. And they have the level of adoption is very low for the typification that we can do. So, and I think that from this program at the ICA, this is our vision, and we think that this is a very good time and to promote this the digitalization process that is just starting, and somehow this is going to allow us to capture early all the benefits that this digital transformation entails, and to minimize undesired effects, because as with any transformation, they will happen. So okay, I ended 55 minutes in a second, sorry, in advance. So thank you for your contribution and for all your efforts of coordination on AICA. And now the idea is to see if you have any questions and comments that you can send or make it either directly or through the chat, so that we can start thinking about the closing of today's event, so that we don't take much of your time. Once again, I would like to thank all my colleagues from AICA for the consideration and for providing the elements to start thinking about the continuity of these efforts at all levels. So I don't know if there are further questions or comments. So please go ahead. I was taking a look at social media as well, and there are some comments in general, but not questions.
Sí, esa era la pregunta, la que nos pone Daniel.
Well, we have a question from Daniel, the Director General of BASE. When will we start working? Well, I think that this is an important aspect, of course. And I think that we have been able to identify some lines of work and many interests. I don't know if any of my colleagues from AICA would like to make an additional comment. Mario, Agustin, Daniel, Federico. Would anyone like to elaborate on this before closing? No? Well, I see no comment. So, next, we had a brief segment for the closing remarks on behalf of Joaquin Arias, an international specialist in policies. But unfortunately, he has had some problems with his voice, and he's not doing fine. So we wish him a full recovery soon. So to close, I would like to share some general considerations of everything that we've seen today. Again, thank you all for your participation, all participants and everyone who has written, those who were not able to participate but showed interest. Obviously, we will be sharing the materials with you, and even recordings in both the English and Spanish, maybe in a video format for you to take a look at it afterwards. And as for the first segment that we had from a global vision, where we were able to take a look at the convention specifically on the Innovation Center at global level, we saw all the opportunities that we have, because they are focusing less on solutions and they want to go beyond technological solution, as Carlos said. And this is where we have opportunities deriving from in terms of providing answers to all these traditional problems, but going beyond all of this. And he was mentioning if we could improve the current conditions on the current challenges that we have, but not staying there, but also looking for new solutions and having proposals in order to change, to make changes and to improve, and not only to stay with the traditional aspects, because all these efforts that are climate related, and how can they be linked to the Paris Agreement and all our commitments. And obviously, they mentioned the participation in COP27, and hopefully we'll be able to keep on working at that level too. And also for the opportunity to work with the regional centers the center that we have here in the Latin American and Caribbean region, and all the focus and experience that will be used as base with concrete cases for actions to try and address common problems in terms of rurality and the smallholder farmers' agriculture as livelihood to try and improve in a practical manner the handling and commercialization. And in that sense, of course, we'll take a look at the benefits of these crops and also some clear examples regarding how innovation and digitalization and servitization and all those concepts that were explained at the beginning of the segment, and how these will be implemented, what they consist of, and also taking a look at the landing that we've had in other regions to try and take advantage of all the exchange of experiences. And we also had a timely vision and look at all the tools and how we can apply them to better understand their features and functionalities, the information provided, and also the levels for download purposes, to keep on working on that for decision-making purposes when it comes to commercialization. And we also saw in terms of participation, not only for growers, but also throughout all the different stages of the supply chain. And we also watched part of a video. So we would really like to see the whole video, and along with all these experiences and all this information gathered, to be able to understand from our region where we can see the opportunities. And that is part of the focus, considering all the commitments and needs that are climate change related, but not staying there, but to keep on looking for these alliances that are strategic in order to be able to scale all of these experiences and to be able to look for new alternatives and to be able to propose them at all levels from a global focus that allows for connections, and not only on climate change, but also on decentralization, biodiversity, and these universal commitments that we currently have, but also talking about regions, countries, and the participation of the different territories and the different focuses that we have. So in that sense, these are some of the topics that we cover. We're going to have a more completed scheme that we can share with you later on. And once again, I would like to thank you all for your interest, for your time and dedication. And as Daniel said, hopefully to start working closely with all of you on all these new initiatives, projects, and ideas, and to be able to discuss them in spaces like the one we had today with our people from AICA and all our associates. So again, thank you everyone for your participation, for your interest, and I wish you a very good day or afternoon.